You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Can a group of utter misfits save the world despite themselves? We're going to figure out that answer today on today's episode of Systematic Geekology. We are the priests to the geeks discussing today Critical Role Campaign 1. I am your host, MC Ashley, Christian Ashley, whatever you want to call me. I answer to many things. I'm, of course, joined by the best co-host in the history of the world, the one, the only, TJ Blackwell.
Thanks. I definitely wasn't late.
He has never once been late, and he will never be late again.
Never.
It's impossible. He arrives precisely when he means to. But we are joined today by a special guest. This is Brian Bennett. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing very well. Thanks so much.
Excellent. So
Happy to be
tonight, that's awesome. Before we start into our proper discussion, let me ask you, gentlemen, what have you been geeking out on recently? And we'll give Brian time to figure this out since you're not used to it as much as we are, hopefully.
It's still Guilty Gear. I've really been grinding. I have a pipe dream of attending Arc Revo in the end of March. So I have about 2 months to go from a pretty decent player to one of the best. So
Excellent.
I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna try.
Yeah, those fighting tournaments, they're no joke.
Mm-mm.
People have it down to the frame, and that life's not for me. But I'm glad other people can enjoy that.
Yeah.
Now, as far as on my end, I mentioned before I'm replaying The Witcher 3. I am now on the Blood and Wine DLC, and reliving Toussaint in the new upgrade is wonderful. I love this game. Highly recommend it to those who can get into it. It's a little janky at the start if you don't know what you're doing, but Witcher 3, definitely worth it. Brian, what about you?
Oh, there's a lot. I'll just say right now, I think I'm geeking out on Bad Batch Season 2.
Excellent choice.
Enjoying that. Episode 5 had me scratching my head a little bit, and haven't got to episode 6 yet, but looking forward to it. So,
the 5 is the one where they're treasure hunting, correct?
Entombed, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I like that.
Yeah, say 6 was good. Have you had a chance to get up on that, TJ? Last time we recorded, you hadn't.
No, me and Brian are on the same length here. We are 6 just hasn't happened yet.
Gotcha.
Maybe when we're
to all
done.
of our listeners, look out, because we may or may not be streaming a live stream of us watching through the Bad Batch fairly soon. So keep that on your calendars whenever that does occur. So let's move into our topic proper, and that is, of course, Critical Role Campaign 1. So let me ask everyone, what's everyone's familiarity with the show? Let's keep this constrained to the first campaign only.
Right. Well, I've been around, me and my closest friends, we all play D&D, and Critical Role is what got a lot of them into it. And I never got into campaign 1 that hard. I never got really into it. It was already so far along when we started. Yeah, I couldn't convince myself to catch up. I read the recap though, so I didn't feel super left out when everybody talked about it. But as far as actually watching the campaign, I really hadn't until Legends of Vox Machina. And it's pretty cool to watch it with, my Critical Role Vox Machina diehard friends. And they're like, oh, that's different. That's changed. That's not how they did it in the campaign. So it's almost like I watched the real thing.
There you go. Brian, how about you?
I'm a critter. I've been I was a little late to starting campaign 1, but with the severe dedication and commitment and plowing through many YouTube episodes, I caught up to the end of campaign 1 before it ended. So I've been there from the beginning almost. Seriously, one of my favorite things. So I'll continue to watch through campaign 2, 3, and now the animated series. So
excellent.
Love it.
Well, my memory is a little fuzzy. I may have said something to contradict myself today on the What's New episode we did because my memory is awful. But I was DMing at that time when campaign 1 was airing. And I kept having my players say, oh, did you take this from Critical Role? Or, oh, did you take this idea from Matt Mercer? It's like, what is Critical Role? Who is Matthew Mercer? And why is he stealing my plots? And I was upset, but I said, no, you got to watch it. It's great. So I went out. I think they were around like episode 103-ish. I started watching from there. from the beginning, and I caught up a little before the finale, like right before they took their big break between campaign 1 and 2, and I was blown away. Like, and I know this is sacrilege in some communities, but in order to get that quickly, I watched it 2 times speed because I needed to get to it, and I wanted it. I needed to consume it, and I loved it. So, TJ and I did an episode not far long ago where we discussed D&D and our history with it. But I'm going to ask the question again because this is my show and I can do whatever I want right now. So, has everyone here played D&D? And if so, which editions and in what roles have you been in?
All right. Well, I've mostly played 5th edition as far as D&D goes. We stick to 5e. We did do the Star Wars 5e thing, which is a really cool system. They didn't change a whole lot. But for any other RPGs, we just go outside of D&D instead of 3.5. We don't play 4 off of reputation alone. But Josh with the Bad Opinions did play 4. A little fun fact. But I've been playing for years. We actually just ended our main campaign after a solid 4.5 years. That ended last month. So that was cool. But I'll DM sometimes. Usually I'm playing. But it's been pretty standard, pretty constant in my life for the past few years.
Brian?
I am old school in a lot of ways. I have played back when in the basic set, the advanced D&D, played through that. I was both player and DM there. Then had a long hiatus of playing back in 2016 started in 5e, so somewhere in that time frame. Have run modules, have created my own stuff, have done a number of different things. I run a program at a community center for middle school or high school students on Wednesday afternoons, teaching the next generation of DMs how to do it and get going. So
awesome.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
Let's see. I got my start, unfortunately, in 4th edition. And it's fine for what it is. I mean, moving from 4th to 5th edition, much better. But I enjoyed my time with it. I got into 5th edition when I was at my small group one night, and a bunch of other guys were talking about D&D, and they said, well, we don't know what we're doing. We don't have a DM. It's like, well, I've DM'd before. I can do it. And so we went with them, had a really fun time. We managed to finish the campaign within like 2 or 3 years. Immensely enjoyed it. I also played for some of them. They became DMs after that, after not having the confidence in themselves, and they did a phenomenal job. Right now, I'm currently with one of my old college buddies playing through the Call of the Netherdeep, which Matt Mercer actually made, that module, and I'm having a lot of fun. So I love awesome. D&D. I'm all here for it.
Yeah, I even used it at the campus ministry. We had, for probably about 5 years or so, had a Sunday afternoon game for students to drop in and play, and it's amazing the ability for that game to help folks bond and get together and build relationships. It's a pretty great game. So I think I think that could be where I could work on a lot of tabletop RPGs. That one's just out in the front. So yeah,
it's more accessible to some people. Yeah, I feel
true.
It.
Yeah,
it's really simple. Makes it really easy to dive in and focus on your character. I feel like.
I think they did just about everything right in 5th edition as far as mechanics goes. It helped people. It's not overly crunchy. It's not rules light. You still got to pay attention, but it's so intuitive for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it's a really good jumping off point for somebody who just wants to get into an RPG, because they can get a lot more complicated, or they can go to something a little simpler.
It's very flexible in that regard, and it's well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's D&D, but as far as Critical Role is concerned, one of the things that unfortunately exists is just how much of a time crunch it is to get into it. Like, what about it specifically, Critical Role, makes us want to watch it despite all the hours we have to pour into it?
So, Campaign 1, I did not. However, Campaigns 2 and 3, it's definitely the fact that these people, this group of incredibly talented people, are very obviously just good friends that happen to be extremely talented at what they do, and Marisha Ray.
Yeah, you don't know this, Brian, but TJ has a massive anti-Marisha Ray bias. I'm kind of in the middle on her. So what's your opinion on Marisha as a player before we get into anything else?
I think, well, not to jump, but campaign 3, I think her character is the best that she's had. I think Claude is fantastic. I've never had any problems with Marisha. I think she's a really solid player. So I think the thing that gets a lot of folks invested in Critical Role, right? It helps that they're really talented, but they care about the story. And because they have so much experience in the midst of acting and improv, which is obvious, they're willing, and this helps because they're friends too, they're willing to let some people have the spotlight at different times so that there can be threads, arcs that are focused on one character but not on, another. There's a number of places and other actual plays where you can, I've tried to listen to some, and they're not as professional and they don't give the space. There's always people clamoring to be and sort of forcing themselves in the spotlight, and it's not helpful.
Learning when to speak and when not to speak is one of the most, critical is the word I would use here. Things you can do in a D&D campaign. Because, we want our character to be in the spotlight, but at the end of the day, if that story moment isn't about us, it's maybe time just to, pipe down, let them have their moment in the spotlight, because you wouldn't want them interrupting you and yours. So I'd agree completely with all those. It's the characters and the plot. Matt is a master wordsmith. I love the worlds that he creates, the characters he embodies. And obviously it helps a lot that they're all voice actors. They can switch to certain roles, through certain characters very easily. But actually, all that brings up one of the points I was going to make today, which is that one of the terms that was created in the aftermath of Critical Role is the Matt Mercer effect. For those who don't know, this is considered to be a phenomenon where new players, mostly new players, kind of expect every D&D campaign they end up going to kind of function the same way Critical Role does. So I ask you all, do you feel that this is an unfair comparison to have or a legitimate concern to bring up as a DM or even as a player?
I think the Matt Mercer effect is it's a real thing. I've had students, when they go to join, they were afraid about the Matt Mercer effect, not because they expected it to be that our game would be the same. They were afraid they couldn't play at the same level in the same way, right? So I've always thought about it as everybody expects the DM to be just like Matt Mercer, which isn't the case. But I think there are easy ways to get around that and work with that, with like a session 0 in it with players, so that you can set the stage first and foremost, and everybody understands from the beginning, this isn't a bunch of nerdy ass voice actors playing D&D. So
yeah, it helps a lot for people to remember that trying to role play, all of Critical Role literally role plays professionally. That's their job.
Yes,
that's what voice acting is, and now it's their job to do it in the D&D campaign. That's also their job. They are quite literally the most professional you could be at it. So I think it's extremely unfair for people to compare themselves to the Critical Role cast just across the board. And it leads to some things. Some, people not feeling so good about themselves. But it's not their fault.
Both well put with your points. I agree completely. It's like, you can't expect yourself to be Matt if you're DMing. You can't expect yourself to be Sam or Laura, what have you, when you're a character. You know what? You have to be you. And sometimes you're going to fumble. Guess what? They fumble too. But you don't always focus on that because you remember all the hyper moments that they perform. You know what? They're just people. And especially, I remember when they were doing the Between the Sheets edition on their YouTube page, Matt talked about his imposter syndrome. And that was sort of one of the things that really helped me kind of understand, because I had that moment too. It's like, I'm not as good as a DM. Like, all my ideas are terrible and no one cares about this. But like, he brings up the same thing. And this man is so successful, it's not even funny. And it was one of those moments I needed to hear that. And I really appreciate him doing that, because there are a lot of people that I'm not going to diagnose myself. I've never been diagnosed, but it kind of feels that way sometimes, the imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. The feeling of, who am I to sit in this seat and run a game, right? I can't do it. Well, you know what? If there's not someone willing to step up and sit in the DM chair, nobody gets to play. So learn from it, have fun with it. As long as everybody's having fun, everybody's doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're the DM. You make the rules. Go crazy with it. That's what I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the same time it kind of applies to ministry in some respects too. It's like, who am I to be able to, lead this section or to oversee this production or even just to be a helper in whatever needs to be done? Greeters, I know some of us have an anti-greeter bias on this podcast, and that's just fine. But like those roles need to be fulfilled in certain areas in the church. And if I'm spending all that time, I'm not good enough, I'll never be able to do it. Well, guess what? I work with a lot of people who aren't good enough. The only reason we are ever considered to be good enough is because of Christ.
Yeah.
All right. Well, all that to say, that's the background for Critical Role Campaign 1. Let's actually get into the nitty gritty. And let me ask you, gentlemen, does everyone here have a favorite character they want to talk about? And of course, we have our Marisha Ray keyless section for TJ for our least favorite character. So, Brian, why don't you go ahead and tell us who your favorite is? Or if you have one.
It was really hard to think about that. There's elements that I liked about all of the characters. I think, though, I think Pike comes out for me. I'm a sucker for clerics. I play a cleric. Sure, I'm a pastor. It feels cliche, but it's there were things about Pike's arc that really seemed to resonate. I thought that Ashley did a great job, sort of spiritual journey type stuff. So that was good. I liked the twins, Vex and Vax. I thought they were great. Grog and Scanlan were hilarious. So, but yeah, I'll stick with Pike. A lot of good on all of them, but yeah, I'll go with Pike.
Do you have a least favorite?
Yeah, no, I think everybody had moments there. I guess, no, I don't really have a least favorite. I like the way they all gelled. I thought they were a great ensemble. And there were things I liked about every one of them. Yeah.
Right, TJ.
So I'm torn, honestly, between Grog and Percy. I love them both. They're both, Percy's kind of edgy. He wears it on his sleeve.
You don't say.
He's real open about it, which is something I tend to not like, but, I can't believe Taliesin gets it done. I forgot his name, but Taliesin does it really well. And he's written such a complex character that I really enjoy a lot. Also, he has a gun, which I think is awesome in a D&D setting. My favorite character that I played ever had a gun in a D&D setting. Just makes it feel so much more special. He's on my credit card. But Grog, kind of playing against the stereotype of big, dumb, shallow. I love watching Travis play Grog to his fullest extent.
I thought his movement of, he gives a great example of how to play dumb, right? Like, just because his intelligence isn't high, he still had stuff to contribute, and it was a great way to watch people play a lower intelligence character. It was good.
Yeah.
I
don't like Keyleth.
It was great. What's that?
All right, here's your soapbox. Have at it.
I think, honestly, I might just not like druids.
Okay.
I don't know. Keyleth bothers me a lot, just on like a deep personal level.
In what ways specifically?
Every time she makes a decision, it just upsets me. I don't think there's a rational reason. I think I just really don't like Keyleth. Bo is fine. I'm not strictly anti-Marisha. I really didn't like Keyleth. I'm not even sure why.
Yeah, I would say for Keyleth specifically, and Marisha as well, she suffered a lot from a ton of people back in the day, and even still today to some extent, who just had it out for her, and they didn't like how she played. They didn't like what she was doing with Keyleth. And some of that, I'd say, is valid criticism. Now, others of it, where the misogyny element came into it, just the vitriol they felt towards her was just astounding. It's like, you have never met this woman before. Please leave her alone. She does not deserve it. And TJ in no way has done this, but I would like to get ahead of that conversation because I know there's a ton of people out there who are curious about our takes on it. So I would say that I'll go least favorite first since we're talking about Keyleth. And Keyleth is my least favorite from the original team. I don't agree with some of the choices she made. I think she moralized way too much without understanding why certain people made certain choices. I speak specifically of a scene, we'll get to his character later on. I think it was like episode 26 or something like that, where Tiberius killed someone that they were fighting, and it was an old woman. She got all uppity about this, despite the fact that she had killed a child pre-campaign at one point in time, from what I understand. So that is what it is. I think that if I may have mentioned this on the What's New episode as well, that if I found out that my leader had completed the Aramente, but she had jumped off a cliff, turned into a goldfish, and died, I don't know if I would respect that person, man or woman. So that's it. This is not, I'll make that perfectly clear. This is not a Marisha Ray, Keyleth Bash party. We don't want to be those people. But I do think there's some valid criticisms that can be made towards her character. And I do agree she worked a lot better as Bo in the second campaign. I think she was more comfortable in that role as opposed to Keyleth. And I think Keyleth was her trying out a different kind of person than she would normally play, is what I think happened. So that's what it is. Now on to my favorite. And that's Scan the Man, Scanlan. Love my Bard boy. He reminds me a lot of one of my good players I had in my first campaign. He was also playing a bard, just carefree, all over the place, having fun, making jokes, enjoying what he was doing. While at the same time, there's a lot more depth to him as time goes on, especially when he's confronted with a daughter that he never knew existed, especially when he realizes that he's not as respected as he should be among his teammates. And he leaves. And I was like, what? How could they let this happen? Why would a person let their character leave a campaign? And then he comes back as Sam comes back as Terry. Terry. And then comes back again as Scanlan. It was a very powerful arc. So love Scanlan. Anything else about our favorite characters before we want to move on?
I will say the goldfish scene, I think, is just extremely funny. She just made a mistake. It happens. Super funny.
Yeah, I think that was really supposed to be comedic effect and just to be fun. And yeah, oops.
Many such cases. Oh, whoops.
All right.
Also, that Matt Mercer killed her. There's a cap on fall damage.
I agree with him. There shouldn't be.
But that's true. It's like terminal velocity. It's real life.
Yeah.
Just in real life, we can't have higher HP than, a regular human. So we don't survive that.
Don't bring mathematics into my mathematics-based game.
I'll try.
So let's move on to what is our favorite arc? And as well, do we have a favorite moment within this series? TJ.
So I'm not sure if I have a favorite moment yet. I really do. I need to go watch the whole campaign through. But my favorite arc is probably the Briarwoods. I dig it. I love it. I love me some good edgy Percy content.
And that provides that in spades.
It was, I agree. I think the Briarwoods, I think they were super smart to start, not to get too far away from it, but I think they were smart to start the animated series with the Briarwood arc because it has so much gravitas there that it's really serious. There's a lot of good stuff there. But Chroma Conclave is also another equally great arc. Hard to argue with that.
Yeah, I agree. Starting the series where they did with the show was a good choice.
Yeah.
I would say I'm biased against the Chroma Conclave purely because I think it's cheesy to have your main antagonist be a dragon in Dungeons and Dragons. But that's just me. I get it. I do love a good dragon fight every once in a while. My first big campaign, our main antagonist was Tiamat. So
the hypocrisy flows.
I will say the moment when Keyleth enfeebles Raishan, that was
powerful,
incredible. That it's one of my favorite moments of the whole season of that campaign one.
Yeah, well, using that feeble mind to get a caster down that low, that was well played.
Yeah, that's what legendary resistances are supposed to be saved for.
I think she had lost it at that point in time.
Yeah.
And I think they were fighting tactically to make that happen, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I watched it.
So it was just a big, long, drawn-out battle. There were ultimately there were a lot of moments where if they hadn't used the legendary resistance, it would have gone bad for him too. So,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
I suppose for me, my favorites would be the final arc and the Chroma Conclave. And I'm not going to say Chroma Conclave because it's been brought up before. Also because there's a little resentment from me because I was setting that up in my campaign as I was watching Critical Role 1. And I realized Matt was doing the exact same thing I was. And I said, well, I'm going to have to change everything because now that my players know I watched this, they're going to think I stole it from him. So I would say the whole final fight with Vecna, them bringing up, it's like perfect to me. Like my favorite comic book series of all time is Marvel Team Up. Not because it's the greatest storytelling ever told, but because I love to see Spider-Man, like, and even Marvel 2-in-1 or The Thing, like teaming up with another superhero to fight a supervillain. And it's a wonderful thing. And at the very end of this campaign, we get them bringing up people from all the way at the beginning to help them out with this mission. And I love it when a series does that. So as far as favorite moments go as well, I'm either going to say it's the moment where Grog is able to kill Kevdak, because I thought he was a goner for a moment there, but he managed to pull it out. And the other I would say was the counterspell at the end. It kills me still today. And for those of you who don't want to watch that episode, do watch Matthew Colville's episode on YouTube about that moment. It is so powerful just to hear him talk about it in such a way. I love it. It's such a huge character moment. Like Scanlan was saving it specifically for that wish, but he needed to get rid of Vecna. Beautiful. Yeah.
Well, great moments there too at the very end when Joe Manganiello's
oh yes,
paladin lops off the hand of Vecna and disappears. Oh, great stuff.
It's like, what just happened?
You're right. That counterspell when he was saving it for the wish, Colville's analysis of that was spot on. It was so good. So good.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've talked about that peak, let's move on to something else, which is something I was thinking about as I was watching the Legend of Vox Machina, actually, which was how Matt handles resurrection within his campaigns. And I think it's one of the greatest things he does, because sometimes in 5e, in my opinion, once again, it feels like resurrection is kind of easy, especially like revivify and stuff like that, which, you know, to a certain extent for a lower level party, it should be. But also, it feels like it should cost more. But what is it about our perception of resurrection that makes us want to believe that it's some difficult task to perform? And and especially, what do we think about resurrection in light of Jesus's resurrection, or like Lazarus, or what have you within the Bible?
Yeah, we all have that thought in our heads. It's like, this is too easy. It should take at least 3 days, and you have to be the Son of God. This character is dead forever. No resurrections. You know, something like that. But we definitely stole that rule. Matt's rules for our campaign. It became extremely difficult to resurrect anybody. And we played another smaller campaign where it just wasn't possible at all, unless you were part of the church.
Wow. Okay. Brian?
I play a cleric. I have those spells in my spell list, right? So I think the things like Revivify are great because you have to get it like right away. It's a really quick thing. So in some ways, it's not always easy, and it doesn't, like, if there's a body part missing, it doesn't put it back, right? So
yeah, I
do love his Mercer's use of resurrection in that way, where you have to sort of woo the person back, right? It's not an automatic. It's easier, but it's not easier than at the beginning. And the more times it has to happen, the harder it gets. I think that's great. It's the same thing I have issue when folks do sort of like movies that talk about, the apocalypse or whatever, or they use apocalyptic imagery. That's not, the disaster stuff isn't the apocalypse. The apocalypse is the revealing of something. In the same way, it's not resurrection. It's more resuscitation, but I get they use it because you're coming back from the dead. You know,
yeah.
In the end, I don't have any problems with it. I think it's a great, it's a good mechanic to have, because especially some of it, true resurrection, you got to get the big honking gem to get it. So that's tough. Yeah, I'm play with it in the system as it is, or add that little extra oomph. I do like the little extra.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important to make your players, from a DM's perspective, make them stick to the materials cost. Even if you
Absolutely.
do it for nothing else, just the resurrection spells, because otherwise it is definitely too easy.
Yeah, I as the cleric, I always maintain. I have a whole list of like, I've got 5 diamonds worth 300 GP. I keep track of that because I want to make it real. I don't want to make it too easy. I don't want to just say, oh, I cast Revivify. Thankfully,
Yes.
we haven't had to do it. Yeah, but
Soon.
I want to stay honest to it as the player to immerse myself in the world.
Yeah, we need more players like you out there.
Yeah.
And what I will say in this regard, as far as 5e rules go, the way I've shifted things, I like what Matt does, but what I do is it only works once for each spell. So you can get revivified once. You can get true as resurrected once. Then after that, it doesn't work. So I'm not there to like be a killer DM by any stretch of the imagination, but I would like there to be a consequence, especially since when I think of resurrection specifically in the Bible, I think of what it cost Jesus to do. I think of what has to happen for a prophet to be empowered with the ability to bring someone back to life. Like Elisha doesn't do it because he's Elisha. He does it because God has gifted him with that ability to do it. So, and then was it the man who fell out the window with Paul? It's like him bringing him back to life. Like that costs something to do. Like it costs Paul his faith to be able to do that. And that's a good thing. Now, obviously D&D and Christianity don't always align one-to-one. They shouldn't, because they are two different things. So that's enough of that. We'll move on to our next topic, which probably may be one of the most controversial parts we're going to discuss tonight. And that would be one of the most unfortunate incidents that happened within the game was the departure of Orion Akaba, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. As a player and Tiberius as a character, due to several inappropriate decisions that he had made both in the game and out of the game. Like, how do we feel about, in the aftermath, it's been several years, how has this been handled?
I know nothing about this incident.
So since I was watching it afterwards, I was like, what happened? And there was very little mention. They just sort of cut it off. I think it's the best possible way because Critical Role folk didn't go and drag Orion through the mud, right? There was no sense of that. And I had to kind of go and search and figure out like what did happen. And at that point, there was still some talk on Reddit and whatnot about what was happening. Now it's sort of been a hard and fast. We're not talking about it anymore.
Yeah.
Move along.
I mean, they got tired of answering.
Yeah.
Especially on the subreddit.
Yeah. And right. And at some point during campaign 2, they were like, look, we're going to just stop posts about Orion because he's not part of it anymore. We're done. It's done. I will say I was shocked when there was the scene near the end when they tried to send a message to Tiberius and it was clear it didn't find its recipient.
Purchase.
Yeah, right. And so that was the sign of Tiberius died. Bold move. At the same time, Orion had tried to do his whole own little series with Knights of, I forget the name of the kingdom, but he tried to have Tiberius have his own character, sort of a spin-off thing, doing his own thing. It wasn't so good. And
I will say the way Matt handled that was immensely respectful. He allowed Tiberius to die a hero in the Chroma Conclave arc. I think they're probably going to gloss over that if they even go to Draconia in Legend of Vox Machina, which I doubt. But I think within Critical Role proper, he did a good job of, okay, we are acknowledging he was around. He was part of this team. He was a hero. Let him die as a hero. All for that. And I think one of the things that really sparked this question in my mind was, I mean, not too far ago, we had all the recent scandal within the SBC. And I'm, Brian, if you didn't know, I'm a member of the Southern Baptist Church.
I did not
call myself non-denominational, but I'm at a seminary, so kind of can't get away from it. But one of the things that brought up there was how certain pastors were being shuffled from church to church and continuing to commit sexual abuse against their constituents, just like we were making fun of the Catholic Church for doing. And I think in the legacy, like one of the things Ryan did, he was very inappropriate towards fans. In the game, he made some inappropriate comments that, you would think someone like Scanlan would make, but at the end of the day, it was always one of those more playful ways versus like, it looks like you may be getting aroused kind of ways, and not exactly what you want for a healthy work environment. So I ask all that, like, how should we handle that within our own churches?
I feel like there was a lot there that was really similar to sort of the notion of excommunication. The only problem was excommunication is meant to ultimately bring about reconciliation if possible. But here, this has been pretty clear. There's not a whole lot of possibility for reconciliation.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of repentance coming from his side of things in the same way.
It's complicated, right? Because we only see anything that's sort of outward facing. We don't.
Yes, that is very true.
That's the tough part. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I also feel like some of the decisions he made caused a lot of hurt, and we want to work towards reconciliation, but it's not an easy. It's not just saying, "Hey, I'm sorry," and we're going back to what it was. There's got to be some real work, and I'm going to trust them to do the work they need to do, and however that all goes about, we'll see. And in the game, as much as I said, people who are willing to give the spotlight to others, that was a place in gameplay we saw more and more. He always in the center, always wanted to be in the spotlight. And I would say this with any game: it's okay to step aside and tell someone, "Hey, I'm not sure this game is for you." Right? If you want to play with a different style, that's fine. But that's not this table. That worked out, I think, pretty much in the same way.
Yeah, I would say how to learn to communicate between DM and players is a huge part of this. And I think from what I understand, Matt handled that fairly well. So,
yeah.
Unless anyone has anything else they'd like to bring up.
No, I do think there's the point that when we talk about our churches, talk about our congregations, there are places for transparency and honesty and the ability to speak what is going on. And there are times that we want to be able to look, something happened. We can't really talk about it. Not in a way that hides things or tries to obfuscate them, but also respects the dignity of the person that was perhaps making some really bad choices.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Because like in our hearts, we always want people to repent. I mean, because we want ourselves, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, to repent as well. And it's difficult to see them not. And so sometimes we go to the other side and say, "Oh, well, you're just gone then." And sometimes you need to get rid of them. But
I think there's a difference between secrets. And if a church is keeping secret, I don't say this because I served a church where there were secrets kept. I came in after they voted out my predecessor. Secrets were bad. And so I had to, when we had an incident, something else, I announced to the congregation, I said, "Hey, there was a thing that happened. It gives us more questions than answers. And if you have a reason or something that you think that might be an issue, come talk to me and we'll see how it goes." But I didn't just blow it out there for everyone, we didn't keep it secret. We were as transparent as we could be. So I think that's an important piece for us all in how we live together in community.
Yeah, I'll say my old pastor from my home in North Carolina just retired a couple weeks ago. And he made sure when he was doing this, is like, because he's fairly young to retire, like, look, there's no scandal going on. I am telling you this right now in front of the whole congregation, so the rumors do not spread. Like, no one's forcing me away. Like, this is what God told me to do. And the fact that he has to say something like that says a lot about us. It's like, oh, well, he's leaving. He's in authority. He's in power. Well, something obviously has to be wrong. And I think part of it is our problem of how we've handled that in the past.
Right. That's exactly right. The problem is the number of times when churches have said they're leaving, but no, there's nothing wrong. And then 4 years later, we find, oh, no, it really was.
Yes.
We had a scenario play out here with a church/campus ministry here in Pittsburgh that I was like, this isn't going to end well. And it sure didn't. And they don't exist anymore.
Well, we kind of touched on the secret question I was going to ask, so let's just move forward. And before we wrap things up, you guys have anything else you really want to talk about for Campaign 1 before we continue on?
The vestiges are so cool.
They are so cool.
Absolutely.
So cool. Magic items that evolve. Give me that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I did the same thing then with friends in a game we were playing. I was like, "Ooh, I'm doing that."
Yeah, that's so cool. And they weren't like super broken. They were just good. They were really good, but they weren't like ridiculous.
They came up to the level of the player, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a really smart idea. I love it.
Yeah, I had a really kind DM who let me as a level 1 start off with one that I had made. And in its base form, it just did magical damage. But as the time moved on, you found, if you keep rolling, it does a random sort of damage besides it was a bow. Besides the piercing damage it did. And it kept growing and growing and gained other attributes that I didn't make. And he decided to make on his own to surprise me because he liked the idea so much. And that was so much fun to do because it was like a collaboration between us. So I love that Matt did this. It was so fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great that your DM did that, because I think collaboration is at the heart of this whole game. And we see that within Critical Role in general, that there's always this collaborative story that's going on, and Matt creates this world and he lets the people do stuff in it and sometimes create stuff that happens within it. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite examples of people trying to live up to Matt Mercer before realizing they don't need to is one of my best friends, Josh. We like to call him Josh with the good opinions over here, not on the podcast. Different Josh. I know like 10 of them. But my dungeon master, long time, he was a huge Critical Role fan, and he wanted every one of us to have our own special power, our own special magic dragon-related power, because we're fighting Tiamat. And it's really hard to come up with something that is fair and balanced. So my character, a bard named Tiberius, I didn't know about the other Tiberius at the time, but I got basically the spell Dragon's Breath for free once a day. And Josh's brother's character, who was my last character's dad, fun times, but he got a Dragon Eye, which gave him a +2 AC and +4 to hit bonus, and gave him evasion, which he did not have. Ooh. And gave him resistance to elemental damage, like the Tiamat's 5 damage types. So there was a bit of a disconnect there, but super funny because we talk about it all the time. Like nobody remembers what mine was because I never used it. I was a level 20 bard.
You sure he didn't hate you?
No. I hope he listens to this.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, with that in mind, how would we rate and review first campaign of Critical Role? Gosh, I can't
Critical
speak.
what?
Critical 1.
I think it is a classic Dungeons and Dragons. It's the stereotypical. It is. If there's anything that sort of you can watch and you'll be like, oh, this is the player handbook. This is Critical Role Campaign 1. Nobody strays too far from the tropes. No one they do it well. And I'm not saying that it's cliched, but they hang in there. They've got really interesting stories. They show how to role play and work that into awesome combat. So look, what rate it out of 5 stars? I'm giving it 5.5. I really do like it. And they've only built on that as they went. So it is one of the things that has helped catapult Dungeons and Dragons into the mainstream. There are people who like Dungeons and Dragons, have never played it, but they have watched it, right? That's fine. I'm cool with that. Let me help you play it. But at the same time, if that's how you engage Dungeons and Dragons, that's how you play you engage Dungeons and Dragons. That's great. They're some of the best ambassadors for the game.
For sure.
Well said.
The word quintessential comes to mind.
Mm.
Yeah.
Numerically, don't ask me to do that. Don't put me in a situation.
You do that all the time, TJ. Come on. Don't whip out on this now.
I'm going to give it a 9.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing's perfect.
I would say my fellow... Every time you say that, it just makes me angrier. I would say for myself, I agree with my co-hosts here. This was one of the perfect ambassadors to people for D&D, for how to get into the game, what it can be about, what you can do, what you can't do. It's a phenomenon for a reason, and I am so appreciative of it. It enhanced my love for the game itself. I mean, if it weren't so long, I would rewatch it way more often. But I will give this a 9.5 out of 10. And there is no like typical grading scale here, Brian. So you can do whatever you want. I typically do a 10 base scale. So that is it for Critical Role Campaign 1. Gentlemen, do you have a recommendation for the audience to check out?
Yeah, so if you are a sci-fi person and a tabletop role-playing person, and Starfinder's too complex, which probably so, look up Star Wars 5th edition. Also, Star Wars. You have to like Star Wars. It leans pretty heavily into Star Wars, not just sci-fi. But it is so fun, and we've done 1 out of 3 of our like mini campaign sessions that I'm running for Star Wars 5th edition. And it's such an awesome system. It's fully fleshed out. You get enemies, stats, force powers. It's really impressive what they've done over there. And it's free. It's all free.
Perfect. Brian?
Cool. All right. In this, I'll say same vein. If you like Critical Role or want to think about something else, there's an actual play stream that goes on from the UK called High Rollers. Mark Hulmes is the DM in this band. This one's a little more. He has a great world, but it involves some stuff that's a little sometimes sci-fi related. He's got some stuff coming in from the Astral Sea and all. But Mark Hulmes has shown up on Critical Role. He and Matt are great friends, and I'm trying to remember.
Was that
Was
the
he
guy
the Draconic Sorcerer?
Yeah, the Draconic Sorcerer. Yeah.
Yes.
Does he have like the big beard? Or is it not like huge, but like it's full beard?
No,
I think
no, he's has a little bit of a goatee and all, but not a huge beard. You were thinking of Patrick Rothfuss. He was on Critical Role Campaign 1.
No, I love Patrick Rothfuss. He's my favorite author.
He's fantastic. He was great in that. But High Rollers, they're coming up on the end. So actually, you're watching again. End of their campaign, massively high level epic battles, stunning. But I love Matt Mercer. I think he's fantastic. At the same time, Mark Hulmes is every bit a good DM as Matt. So another option out there for folks to see how things happen.
Well, all right. As far as me, if everything in the PHB and the other expansions doesn't really, tickle your fancy, and you want to test out something new, check out the Unearthed Arcana subreddit, and definitely run by what you would like to do with your DM, because some of that stuff is way too broken for its own good. It does not have playtesters.
Yeah.
But you will find an occasional gem there that is well worth your time exploring. I've used some magical items from there. In my campaigns, I've created classes based on stuff like that. It's a ton of fun, just if you're really into that stuff, just looking it up. So I highly recommend that. Now, everyone, thanks for having us here for this episode. We had a ton of fun discussing the first campaign of Critical Role. Now, everyone else, please check out systematicecology.org. If you want to find all our hosts here today, they'll be there. Joshua has it all set up all neat and nice because he's well organized in that regard. Go ahead and check out other episodes we have. TJ and I, like I said before, we were on a D&D episode with Father Jonathan. It was a ton of fun then, too. Check out our Discord as well. We have a lot of fun conversations there. We want more people there to get more engaged. Check out our Patreon as well. I just became a member last night for whatever monetary amount you can offer. If you can, if you can't, it's not your fault. That's the world we live in. Also, as well, you can look at our website and suggest some episode topics for us. Like, let us know what you want to talk about. So remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries podcast network.